Welcome to Lecture 5. This is the final lecture in Section 1 of your notes. Today we're finishing Techniques for Effective Delivery, and at the end of this lecture, you will be given your first oral assignment, and that will be due via Canvas upload by Thursday evening, and then your responses to that are due by Sunday evening. Of course, you can see all those details in Canvas, and we'll detail that assignment further at the end of this lecture. I hope you have your notes out in front of you, and let's jump in here under number 4 of Techniques for Effective Delivery. Number 4, use a conversational tone of voice when you speak. Use a conversational tone of voice. Now, sometimes if you have been around people who've acted in dramas or whatnot, sometimes they enjoy being melodramatic. They take their character to such an extent that it becomes unrealistic. Now, when you're presenting in front of an audience, you do want to have a vibrant aspect to your speech. You want it to be vivid and coming alive to them, and that takes energy, that takes enthusiasm. However, if you take that enthusiasm and energy and you put it over the top, to the point where it's not you anymore, your audience will recognize that you're being fake. And your audience will take what you're saying and will kind of put it in a side box. Okay, here's someone who's pretending to be, if you fill in the blank, and they're failing, and so I'm not going to listen to them very well. So you want to make sure when you're speaking with them, you want to be on a level that's relatable. Yes, you need to command their respect. We've talked about that previously. But you do want to use a conversational tone of voice that will increase the audience's trust in you, and an increase of trust is important for them to receive and accept your message. Now, how to do this? Letter A, use personal pronouns. Use personal pronouns. Now, if you're writing a paper, everything I'm about to say is completely against Turabian formatting or how to write a paper. This isn't research, these aren't research paper notes. These are public speaking notes, which are different. So when you're public speaking, use those personal pronouns. Include yourself. Hey, I, we, us. A preacher who only preaches at the audience might not connect as well as one who preaches at themselves as a whole, who includes himself in those who need to improve and those who need to grow. We need to study this text and learn from it, not you need to study this text and learn from it. The audience will receive it differently. So we want to make sure that we use personal pronouns. You want to humanize yourself to the audience. Letter B, use contractions. Use contractions such as can't or won't instead of cannot or will not. Now, again, this is antithetical to Turabian formatting. However, to be relatable to your audience, you want to use more common language in that sense. No, don't be sloppy, don't use slang, but use can't or won't. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm unable to do that for you. Oh, I can't help with that. Not, oh, I cannot help with that at this time. Well, it sounds a little bit hoity-toity to speak like this, as you could see as well with the next section here. Say and the instead of a and the. For example, I went to the supermarket, and the lady at the supermarket said that I bought the wrong style of lettuce. I went to a supermarket, and the lady at the supermarket said that I brought the wrong style of lettuce. Well, one's a lot more normal. You might not notice what's off in the first example unless it's pointed out to you like it just was, but you would feel that something's not quite right. And so when you're public speaking, use us and does instead of a's and these. Now, letter D, use personal illustrations. Use personal illustrations. Now, the audience loves to laugh at the speaker more than they love to laugh at anything else. So be personable. Don't just use your strengths when you're making an illustration. Now, in education, in preaching, in whatever you might be going into, you're going to have need of illustrations. Illustrations are important. Illustrations are powerful. Don't shy away from using personal illustrations. You need to use personal illustrations because those are the most alive to you. And if it's alive to you, it'll be alive to the audience. So use those personal illustrations. However, when using the personal illustrations, you should almost always be the bad guy. You should almost always be the one who does something wrong. Be relatable. No, don't embarrass yourself in front of the audience. No, you don't want to do that. But you can tell a story in which you make an embarrassing mistake in such a way that you can still command the audience's respect. I can tell a story about going on a hike and thinking I knew better than the map. So I left the map in the car and we're hiking along, and eventually I found out we're on a goat trail on the side of a mountain, and I had an older gentleman with me, and we ended up clambering up the side of this mountain instead of being on the trail, and it was pretty hard on him, and it cut a day off of our backpacking trip, and I learned to A, read the trail markers, and B, bring a map, just as we should read the trail markers and read the map of life that God gives us in the Word of God. Well, I can use that story of a hike to remind someone to listen to the Word of God and use it as a map for their life without making myself less respectable, but while still being the bad guy or the one who messed up, the one who did something wrong. But if your audience hears you continually talking about this success that you had and using yourself as a positive example again and again and again, your audience is going to lose respect for you. Because we aren't perfect. And if you portray yourself as perfect, your audience will either see through it and say, hey, he's not, and I don't respect that, or they'll think, well, I can never attain that, so why should I try? No, show growth through your illustrations, but don't always be the good guy. Allow the audience to laugh to an extent at you. Letter E, learn to use pauses for effect. Learn to use pauses for effect. Now, silence is one of the most powerful tools a speaker has. Silence. Some people are a master of the pause. Dr. Getch, Dr. Gibbs, these men are a master of the pause in our Christian public speaking setting. Oftentimes when I was in college years ago, I would sit there in college and I would, on a Wednesday night, be a bit tired, and Dr. Getch used to preach at Wednesday night for the college students, not anymore, but he used to preach Wednesday night for the college students. And I would be sitting there trying to pay attention, trying to stay awake, taking my notes, and I'd be kind of taking my notes, and all of a sudden something would be wrong. I couldn't place it, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was wrong. And I would look up to Dr. Getch, and he would start talking again. Now, I hadn't put my finger on the fact that there was a pause there, but he would use a pause just long enough to make it slightly awkward, so I looked up, and he got my attention, and that was for the whole college, not just me, but not so long as to become awkward. He can just master that balance excellently. And with practice, you can learn to use that pause for effect. In your testimony presentation, you shouldn't talk the entire time. You should have pauses within that presentation, times when you let the message of what God has done in your life impact the mind and the heart of your audience. So utilize these pauses. Don't talk all of the time. Letter I. The master of the pause is the master of the audience's attention. Again, Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Getch are excellent examples of this. Now, number 5, eliminate distractions. Eliminate distractions that will turn the audience's attention away from the speech. Now, what are some things about your delivery that you feel could distract the audience from the message? What can distract? Well, letter A, nervous mannerisms. Nervous mannerisms. Hands in your pocket, playing with a necklace or buttons on your clothing. What are some other nervous mannerisms you can think of? There's many that people have. Some of you might like to pull at the edge of your suit coat or pull at the edge of your sleeves you're wearing. Now, a tip for presentations, when you're presenting, especially when you're learning to present. So here in the speech class, I want to be able to see this bone on your wrist whenever you present, okay? This is especially, seems to be a struggle for ladies who like to wear those cozy long sleeves, okay? No, your hands are a big part of your presentation. So I need to be able to see your entire hand down to the wrist. And to do that, just make sure that whatever clothes you're wearing don't cover that bone, okay? If you do, we'll comment on it and we'll work to grow through it, but make sure I can see your entire hand during the presentation. Now, that leading into nervous mannerisms that you can have. Now, about a year or two into public speaking, into teaching here at West Coast, I randomly started finding that I would grab the edge of my suit coat. I don't know what started it, but for about a year, I fought with grabbing the edge of my suit coat, and I'd have to self-reprimand every time I noticed that I would do it. Now, I don't know why that's something that all of a sudden I started enjoying, but you will find you have some kind of nervous mannerism. Maybe again, it's that sway back to forth, playing with a ring, a piece of jewelry, a button on your clothing you're just continually fiddling with. Whatever it is, you don't want to be a fiddly speaker because that'll indicate untrustworthiness and be a distraction to your audience. Letter B, a slumping posture. A slumping posture. If you're kind of slumped over as you're giving your presentation, it's going to take away from the presentation. Your audience isn't going to feel you're excited, isn't going to feel that you think it's important. A friend of mine, when she came on staff here at West Coast Baptist College, in the fall semesters, all the staff and faculty go up on the stage of the worship center and introduce themselves. And we came on staff the same year. And we graduated together, came on staff together. We got up, we did our introductions, and she didn't like public speaking, but she was ready for it. She walked up the stairs with a confident poise. She walked over to the platform, turned to the platform, spoke to the audience, introduced herself, and as soon as she finished talking, she just slumped up and kind of shuffled off the platform. Oh, it hurt. It hurt because I knew she had practiced, I knew she was ready, but when she delivered the words of her presentation, she assumed her presentation had stopped and she kind of just slumped over and walked off the platform. Okay? Now, of course, she adjusted that for the next year, but for her first year introduction, okay, it could have been better. You don't want to distract your audience by having a slumping or disinterested posture. Remember, roll those shoulders back and have them back and on top of your torso. Letter C, a monotonous tone of voice. A monotonous tone of voice. You don't need me to demonstrate that. I had a history teacher in college who was first hour, and he was a little bit monotonous, just read from the notes, and I really struggled to stay awake because there wasn't much vocal variance, there wasn't much pitch difference in his voice. Make sure that you're not monotonous. Have pauses, have exciting times and slower times and more contemplative. Letter D, leaning to one side or tilting your head. Now, you're probably going to think, hey, I would never tilt my head in a presentation. And most of you would be correct. You never would. But some people legitimately struggle with this. And it's not something that would be obvious. It happens when you're in a presentation and someone asks you a question or you have to stop and think about something. Sometimes you kind of tilt your head when you think. And then they'll continue the presentation and forget to straighten their head out. Okay? It does happen. If you're giving a presentation and the world looks a little bit crooked, just remember to straighten your head out. You'll be good to go on that one. Okay, so tilting your head or leaning to one side. That's, of course, the more common, putting all your weight on one leg, kind of having the other leg stick out loosely. It's going to put you in an imbalanced position. You don't want that for your presentation. Letter E, rocking side to side or back and forth from your heels to your toes, okay? Again, these are going to distract from the presentation. Now, how might you identify what your nervous mannerisms are? What your distracting movements are? A great way to do so is you can practice in a mirror, you can ask friends to show you, or probably even better is if you record yourself giving a presentation and then upload that to YouTube, put it on ×2 speed and watch it at ×2 speed. If you have a sway, if you have something that you do routinely, it'll show up a lot easier on ×2 speed, okay? Hey, most of us don't like watching ourselves in a presentation. However, it's a very useful tool. And I try to make a habit of, hey, whenever I do a recording, I need to watch that recording. to see what I can learn about my speaking style. I would challenge you to do the same. Learn your nervous mannerisms, and then use that self-reprimand to slowly rid yourselves of that habit. Now, number 6, practice your speech orally. Practice your speech orally. Letter A, repetition. Repetition is the key to learning. Now, this is true in any area of our lives, whether it's a sport or an art. Repetition is going to bring about that earning. Letter B, not every speech will be memorized, but you should have an organized pattern in your mind. Now, I don't expect you to have your testimony presentation 1 for this course, memorized completely. Now, I have had over the years, maybe one a year, one every 2 or 3 years, I have had a manuscript presenter, someone who types out every single word of their presentation and just memorizes it completely and presents it to the audience, which it takes a lot of work, does have some very definite strengths, does have some weaknesses. It's harder to be emotional if you have it fully memorized or have a relatable atmosphere in that sense. Now, with your testimony presentation, what should you have memorized? Well, you should have the introduction memorized, the first several sentences. You should have the conclusion, the last several sentences memorized, verbatim, word for word. And then in between, you know your life story, so you don't have to memorize all of that. And just have an outline that you know in your mind, okay, this step, this step, this step, this step, this step. And then with a memorized introduction, memorized conclusion, and a clear outline that you've memorized, you'll do a very good job of moving sequentially through that presentation. Now, letter C, time your speech each time you practice it. Time your speech every time you practice it. Now, why do you need to time it every time? Well, that's because as you present, you'll find that you have different times different lengths each time. And you want to time yourself multiple times so that you can find your average and learn to land right on the dot of where you need to land. Letter D, and I would suggest with an online course actually, when you're giving your presentations, because there are time restraints, you can be too short or too long. So when you're recording those, I would recommend that maybe you put up a clock behind your camera that shows you the time. Have something that you can look at. Right now, I have a screen right behind the camera that shows how long I've been recording for. And that's helpful to me. It doesn't show the exact time of recording, it's just a YouTube video, a YouTube stopwatch I pulled up. And it's right there behind the camera. It helps me to know, okay, how long is this lecture? When do I need to wrap it up, right? I don't want a lecture that's 45 minutes long. That's going to be a little bit boring to watch. In some senses, or hard to watch without a break. So I'm watching the time. Okay, how long has this lecture been? I would recommend you do the same. Letter D, work on variety. Work on variety in your voice. Listen to people talk in normal conversations around you and learn how to communicate effectively. Learn how they can create vocal variants. Learn from others. You can do this with gestures as well. Watch different gestures people perform and try to add that to your repertoire. Okay, think of yourself as having a dictionary of gestures, and you can build on that dictionary by watching others. Letter E, practice speaking distinctly. Practice speaking distinctly. Overemphasize enunciation at first. Now, tips for enunciation. We've covered a couple of these. The first is show your teeth. Show your teeth. If you're struggling with clear enunciation, or you know that there's a couple words or a certain letter that you struggle to enunciate clearly, show your teeth as you get to that word, as it comes up. That's going to help you to enunciate it correctly. Number 2, practice over enunciating. And number 3, watch how your lips, tongue, and throat move in a mirror when enunciating correctly, so that you can better understand it and learn to replicate it. Letter F, practice your stance and gestures. This is something called muscle memory. Now, I don't know how many of you have been in a play before. I hope many of you have. It's an awesome opportunity if you ever have the chance. But when you're in a play, especially a professional play, put on maybe by your community theater or whatnot, as you're looking at the script doesn't tell you every gesture that you make. Now, it does have some major movements that are necessary for the story to progress documented. Those are called stage directions. It'll tell you, enter stage right, position yourself down stage left, It'll say, move to chair in center stage or up center stage. It's going to tell you some of those major directives. But as a whole, you're going to have liberty to learn what gestures you want to perform. However, no drama director is going to be happy if you perform a different gesture every time you come to practice. They want you to figure out, okay, in this scene, I have these gestures I make, and I'm going to make those same gestures every time. Well, won't that get repetitive? Well, no, because your audience is only watching it once. The same can be true for any public speaking setting. In your preparation, practice which gestures you will make at which times. I know for these lectures, I've given these lectures time and time again. Often I give the same lecture 3 or 4 times a day. It's that we have a lot of these freshman speech classes on campus that I'm just going from class to class teaching primarily freshman speech. I'm teaching the Bible as well, but man, this is really my heart class that I teach. And so over time, I've been able to develop, okay, when I get to this section of the notes, these are the gestures I give. For example, the process of speech communication, right? It's a process of sending, receiving, and reacting on the part of both the speaker and the listener. You've seen me do those gestures multiple times now over the last several videos. In the same way, when you prepare your speech, practice your gestures ahead of time, learn which ones seem to be more effective, and perform with gestures you've already practiced. This will help not to clog your brain up too much. Because remember, you're thinking ahead as you're speaking as you're thinking, and you're viewing audience feedback. That's a lot to do. And if you're also having to think of, okay, what gesture should I add? What gesture should I add? You're just going to get overcomplicated and you're going to get stage fright. Stage fright's when you have too much going on in your mind, too many thoughts entering it. That's what stage fright is. It isn't everything leaving, it's there being so much in your mind you can't think of the right things. You can't think of the words or the necessary movement. So practice your gestures ahead of time and develop muscle memory. Letter G, finally, talk your speech out. Just talk it out so that you are comfortable with all of the material you have purposed to include. Your testimony is a very personal presentation. So just talk it out with yourself. Talk it out with the Lord. Make sure you're comfortable sharing the information you're going to share. Now, for the oral assignment that you'll be uploading by Thursday evening. Hopefully you've already watched these videos before Thursday and you've already had some time practicing this assignment, but this is the information you do need to know for that assignment. As you look here in your notes, has the assignment details. You will each be giving a 5-minute testimony speech. At a minimum, you should include your salvation experience and how God brought you to West Coast Baptist College. Now, for this, you have between 5 and 7 minutes. You can't go under 5 or over 7. If you do, you'll have points deducted depending on how much under or over you went. For this assignment, your grade will be primarily based on the following factors. Number 1, poise. As the speaker, you must demonstrate that you're excited about this opportunity to share your testimony and are in charge of your voice, emotions, and bodily actions. Number 2, rapport. There should be a connection between you and the audience that develops. This is accomplished by directness and by openness. Number 3, empathy. The audience should think and feel what you are thinking and feeling. If you say something funny, they should laugh, right? You want the audience to be with you. Number 4 is eye contact. Now, this is different for our online course. Normally we have don't focus on one person in the room, scan the audience continuously as you speak. Since you're speaking to a camera, you want to look primarily directly into the lens of the camera. Okay? Now you're not allowed to have notes up anywhere, so there's nothing that should distract you from speaking directly to the lens of the camera. Maybe occasionally looking at a clock that you've positioned, but really look directly at the camera. You don't have to scan the audience because your entire audience is behind one eyeball, one lens. So look into the lens of the camera as you present. And that's how we will grade your eye contact with the audience. Just as it's hard to hold eye contact with individuals, so will it be hard to hold eye contact with the lens. Okay, often you're tempted to look away when you're thinking about something, or when you're trying to figure out what's coming next, or when that rabbit passes by outside, okay? So practice looking directly into the lens of the camera as you present. Number 5, directness. Your purpose should come across. What are you trying to accomplish by giving this part of your testimony? What do you want it to do for the listener? Do you want to encourage them, bring about conviction in some area of their life? You will only speak directly to an audience as you establish this purpose in your mind. So, even though it's your testimony, we each have something we can learn from your testimony. So think about, what can they learn from me? Can they learn to be patient? Learn to be trusting? Can they be challenged to be pure? Challenged to be willing to change? Challenged to not be afraid to ask a question? What's your challenge for this audience? Finally, 6, conversational quality. There should be an informal quality to your voice. You should be likable. And finally, number 7, time. Time your speech as you practice it. Learn to accomplish what you desire in the allotted time. This concludes the first section, or the first overall lecture in our notes. And next we'll be moving on to lecture 2, Who Wants to Listen to You?